Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to have a look at the new features of Ozone 9. So firstly, if you are new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all of my future videos. So at the time of me recording this, iZotope has just recently released the updated version of Ozone 9. Now I have a copy of the Ozone 9 Advanced version, and generally, unless there's something wrong with the product, I update my Ozone 9 as I go through, and because they generally come out with some fantastic new features that help us in our mastering sessions and make life a lot easier for all of us. So some of the new features that they've come out with is a couple of new modules, a low-end focus and a master rebalance module. They've also improved the master assistant feature, and they've separated the match EQ function away from the equalizer module and made it into its own little compartment there, and added some extra features and extra improvements to it. They've also changed the GUI slightly. It's not a massive, when you look on the surface, not a massive difference, but there is some subtle differences, and the way they've laid out the controls and where the information comes up as you're clicking on parts of the screen is more inclined to what they actually introduced in the release of Neutron 3 recently. So if you've checked out Neutron 3, you'll see that some of the things that they introduced in that version have now been implemented into Ozone as well. They've also added a little bit of extra functionality to the Tonal Balance tool, which was a interesting tool that gave you some useful information. It's not a product that I would buy individually, but because it comes with the package, that's great. But they have added some extra features in there. So let's just get into it, and I'll show you around the new features. All right, so first off, let's just have a quick look at the visual differences between Ozone 9 and Ozone 8. And I've got both open here, and as you can see, they're pretty much identical. There's not much in the way of changes here, if anything at all, really. I mean, they've changed the symbol. That's about it. Maybe the font's changed, but other than that, the layout is pretty much exactly the same. I don't really see much in the way of difference here. We've got a slight difference on the side here. But again, that's mainly in the module itself. So from an overall structure of it, there really isn't any difference from that side of things. Things look pretty much the same. So I'd say cosmetically, we probably don't really need to compare too much with Ozone 8 because it is pretty much the same. So if you're comfortable with Ozone 8, you're going to be comfortable with Ozone 9. What have we got new in here? So we can see here we've got an EQ, and that at the moment looks pretty much the same. We can change our layouts. We've got our digital, analog, stereo. Not really seeing anything visually different here. So I'd say that pretty much stays as is. We've got maximizer that looks identical as well. There's no new IRC algorithms or anything like that. So everything is pretty much identical to what we had before there. Other modules, dynamic EQ, again, looks pretty much the same. They have, as you can see here, which I wonder if they did that with the EQ. Yes. Okay, so I guess if you'd seen my videos on Neutron 3, I think it was, they've started to go to this model here where things are popped up on the graph, and you can, not in this case expand it, but sometimes you can expand this little arrow here. And okay, it grays out that section there. That's interesting when I solo this part. But you can see the values appear there instantly on that little graph there. I can't change anything on there. Interestingly enough, I still have to do it here. But, you know, I could have brought this up and had it all displayed down the bottom as well, but I usually prefer to work this way. I'm assuming nothing has changed in the maximizer, but the dynamic EQ, same thing. We have the ability to see things here, and you'll see, okay, this one here, we've got a little pop out here that gives us extra settings. This one we can change the settings on the side, and that's mainly because you can't do it from the graph. So anything that's adjusted from the graph is not adjusted from the controls. And the other settings can be done from this side section here. So that's obviously a bit of a difference because if we go back to Ozone 8, just for interest sakes, if I enable that and I show you the example, you'll see that everything is displayed down the bottom here. So in this case here, we're getting a bigger graph. We're not having this section down the bottom, and we're controlling everything from this little pop-up window here. So very much in line with what they did with the latest release of Neutron 3, same styling there. So they've followed that through. So I would assume that that's the case across most of the stuff here. Again, in the dynamics here, this looks all very much the same as before. Nothing obviously majorly different. Okay, so other than some subtle differences in the graphs and making it more in line with Neutron 3, all the other modules are pretty much the same. The big difference here is we've got a couple of new modules, and that's about it really from this perspective. So we've now got a low-end focus module. We have a master rebalance module, and they've separated out the match EQ. So match EQ used to be included in the equalizer, but they have actually split it out now to a separate module. So we're going to run through the low end focus and the master rebalance in another video. As they're new modules, they need really a bit more time to cover them and play with them. So I will look at them in another video in greater detail, but the point of the low end focus is to be able to really work on our low end, hence the name low end focus, surprisingly enough, so that we can really control that and add some more punch, smooth, whatever we've got to do here. And then our master rebalance tool here gives us the ability to adjust the levels of these three items. So if we find that we have a song that we are mastering and the vocals are a little bit too low, this tool is supposed to give us the ability to boost the vocals, or if they're a bit too loud, we can bring them down. And instead of having to rely on specific, compression techniques and all various other techniques we've used in the past, this one's using some more intelligence and allowing us to do it supposedly simply by just picking either vocals, bass, or drums, and then turning it up or down to suit. But again, we'll go through that in another video. The other major feature that they have updated, whether you love it or hate it, is the Master Assistant. So they have added a little bit difference here in that we have now a modern and a vintage style. So let's have a bit of a run through of that now. Okay, so what I've got here is I've just got a song and here it is as it stands right now. So let's do a a master assistant here, so obviously I'll just go back one step. So I've loaded Ozone on. Doesn't really matter. We can take all of these modules off. It doesn't really matter at this stage. And we turn on Master Assistant, and now we can pick what we want, modern or vintage. So let's go with modern first. And I'm just going to leave the loudness and that to default. So we're just going for an intensity of medium. And that's that. We're going to set it for CD. Just assuming I'm going to output to CD, and I'm going to go next. Now we should play our music, even though it doesn't tell us to do it. It used to tell us to do it. So now it's the listening, analyzing, playing settings. Okay, so just accepted that. We'll just have a quick flick through what it's done. So in the modern setting here, it has decided that it needs a lot more top end, a bit more low end, and it's cutting some of the low mids down here. So big smiley face curve there it's gone for. No dynamics. It's got a dynamic EQ that it is turning on a few ranges here. Doing some dynamic cutting there, 295, bit at 331. It's got a few going on here. And a little bit up the top. And then it's put on maximizer, IRC4 transient, and it's decided the level that it wants to boost to and how fast and all of these settings here. So let's see what it's doing while we play it. Let's see what the dynamic EQ is doing. Maximizer is doing a little bit of limiting, not a great deal. That's before. Definitely brightened it up a bit there. So now what if we try the vintage style on this one? So we'll do the same thing again. All right, so with the vintage one, it moves over to using the vintage EQ, compressor, and limiter. It still has used an equalizer, and it's basically come out with similar. It seems to have boosted it even more, but similar there. And our vintage EQ has boosted a little bit of 60 hertz there. Nothing, 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 and nothing. So that's pretty much all it's done with that. It decided not to do any compression. And it's done, even though it's a vintage limiter, it set it to modern mode, interestingly enough. And then we got our maximizer, which the threshold is set up pretty high, probably because of this limiter is doing the work for us. So before, So let's, for an example here, I'm going to load a second version of Ozone 9. Okay, so let's just run through that Master Assistant again on modern. Okay, so I'm going to control them both from here. Top one is the vintage, bottom one is the modern. So right now this is without it, and we'll flick through them and have a listen to the difference. It's off. Vintage. Modern. So pretty much as iZotope explained in their own videos, what I'm hearing the big difference is the vintage one is a lot more thicker, more low end, not as bright. So it's a lot warmer sounding, and the modern one is a lot thinner and a lot brighter. So that's the update with Master Assistant there. So whether you use Master Assistant or not, if you do like it, then you might like this option here. It's definitely an improvement if you're going to use this, to have that ability to choose between a warmer vintage sound and a modern sound, I think is fantastic. Now, the other big change they did was tonal balance. They've done some updates with tonal balance and pushed that as well. So as a comparison again, I have the new and the old. So here is the original looking tonal balance, and here we have the new one. Looks very similar. Again, subtle changes here. You know, we've moved a few little things around, swapped a few buttons, changed some fonts. So with the previous one, they really didn't have much in the way of styles. Now, there's a lot in this list, but that's because they're mine. So anything that I have that has the word genre after it is my preset. Okay, so in the original one, they had bass heavy, modern, and orchestral. So really, there was only 3 options for you. Now, when we look at the new one, we have quite a few additional options here. Interestingly enough, this is very similar to what I found with my review of the TC Electronic analyzer tool. They seem to exclude metal or any of the heavier genres in their options here. So, you know, your best bet's going to be a rock. It could be modern, but then modern could be more about charts. I don't know why that seems to be a genre that keeps getting missed by all of the manufacturers. It's really weird. So I would love to see a preset for that, but that you can create your own presets anyway. So there's no big deal there, because you can actually create a target from a file or a group of files. And that's what I have done in the previous version. So basically what I did was I would have a folder with, say, 6 or 10, for instance, this one here, 6 or 10 metal songs that I like, that are on the charts, and I would have created a custom target curve from the folder of the audio. So when you do that, it gets you to pick what folder you want to go to. and analyze, and then it will create the curve, which I have here. And then you can save that as a preset. And you can obviously go to the fine option and there. So if we play our song now, we should get both of these sitting here. So if we say pick, I will pick modern or both. We should have similar values. And the readings should be the same, which they look pretty much the same to me. So one great advantage to Tonal Balance Control 2 as opposed to 1 was, to me, this was a great product that came free with other plugins. I would never have purchased Tonal Balance Control by itself because it really didn't do a great deal. It's useful, but it didn't add enough to pay for it. Okay, but the fact that you get it included in Ozone, especially the advanced version, I'm not sure if you get it in the cheaper ones, made it a good complement to the product. Now, what they've done is that we can now solo bands to really hear. Now, to be honest, I thought you just clicked on it, but it's actually a momentary, as it says there. So you have to hold it. So I think that's a really great addition, because when you're looking at your fields here and you're noticing a problem, you might want to have a listen to that problem to see, okay, so what is it that's actually causing that problem? So if you notice that your low end was too high, or your mids, let's just go low, you might want to listen to it and go, okay, now what is it that might be causing that? Is it the kick? No. It's more whatever that muddy sort of synth sound is. That's where that little bump is there. So it really gives you a greater ability to get some insight into your song. So you've obviously got fine mode, broad mode, but that hasn't changed. Now we can also so we can link it to our other plugins, which would allow us to make adjustments as well. So if we had a version of Ozone or Neutron or Nectar probably as well, say on that synth track, if we determine that to be a problem, then we could load it as a source here and we could make adjustments. And we're not actually adjusting settings technically in Tonal Balance. We are actually making the changes to the plugin itself. So for instance, okay, so we have Ozone 9 on our track, and if we go to our Tonal Balance here, you can see this Ozone EQ1. So if I was to be looking at EQ1 here, we are actually adjusting the settings on this plugin. That's all we're doing. So you might say, oh, I want to reduce that a bit. Oh, and I've got the line down now. Maybe that's a bit too much. So you might say, okay, I like that. That's what I want it to be now. We've got our line in the middle. Whereas before, it's up here. You can hear that sort of muddy synth. Now it's thinned it out a lot. We'll start to see that go down over time. Okay, we might say our high mids here is a bit too low. brighten that up a bit. Now, obviously it's a guide and it's based on this reference here. So if we pick the wrong reference, then it's not going to suit. So, I don't know what you would consider this to be, but we can pick any one of these styles. Or as I said, you can create your own style based on your own favorited music. All right, so let's have a look at the Match EQ, which, as I said, it's not a new feature. Match EQ existed in the previous version of Ozone, but before it was basically embedded into your EQ plugin. So here is a standalone version of Ozone 8 Equalizer, and you'll see here we have matching here. So if we were to click on this, we bring up our matching options here, and we can turn it on and off, do our captures and everything else. We have limited controls with this one. We've got some smoothing and some amount. So what they have basically done is taken this out, taken it out of the plugin and placed it into its own separate plugin here. So we have the same settings, but we've just taken that whole thing out altogether. So we still have smoothing, we have amount, and we have our two captures. We also have our ability here to change stereo, mid-side, left, right, but we also have some other filters on the side here. All right, so let's start off by, let's just capture our a reference. All right, so we're going to capture this song. So basically we turn on capture, we play our reference, let it capture for a while. Just let it capture for as long as you feel that it needs to get a good average of the frequency balance. And then we're going to stop it there. Okay, we could clear it if we want, if we didn't like it, start again, whatever else. And then we'll go back to our other song. And now we can capture that song. And we can obviously see as we're doing this, the difference between our tracks. You can see sometimes it pays to pick the right section or wait long enough to get that balance right. Because if we had stopped it too early, we would have had none of that top end because that section didn't have any. So I probably most likely should have picked a different area. Now you can see this white line now. So we've got our yellow, which was our reference. We've got our blue, which is our apply to. So our song that we want to match. And then we get this white line that shows what changes it would like to do. And we can adjust how smooth those changes are or how rough, and the amount. So in theory, if we were to set it like this, this should make the songs identical. But if I did that, it might sound really horrible. So we don't want that. So we can control how much and how smooth. Now the other thing we can do is we can actually determine a range. So we might say that, okay, I know the top end's different, but I don't care about that. I want it to be different, or I just want to ignore it. I want to concentrate on this mid-range here. So we can adjust this to whatever part we want. So that way, if you wanted to go extreme, it would only be affecting this area here. Or you might say, I'm happy with everything, but I want to tackle the low end. So you might say, I'm going to go from about there. That one's not as obvious to here, but you get the point. So we can target whatever we like to target and make it as extreme or as subtle as you like. So that's another great addition that they've added to this Match EQ, and you can see why they've now separated it out into its own plugin, just to get it out of the way of the equalizer and also allow you to make changes here as you so choose. The only downside to having it separated was that in the past, sometimes I might have looked at the match feature and then made some changes manually in the EQ and not actually allowed it to do it for me. To be honest with you, that is a common feature that I will use this Match EQ for before and now. The great thing about doing it now is that I could place this plugin on my mix bus and turn it on, do a capture, compare, have a look at the results, and then go and make what I feel I need to do in my EQ or compression or something to get my balance right. And this is what I used to do in the past. I didn't actually use the Match EQ feature, like I didn't turn it on and get it to do its own matching. I would actually just use it to do a comparison of the frequencies and see what it thought needed to happen to improve it. And then I would actually go into the EQ and I would make my own adjustments and either agree and do some of them or disagree and not do other parts of it. I would do what actually sounded natural to me. But it was a good way to have it as a guide, because sometimes your ears go out of whack or where you're working is not perfect and you're not getting the right balance. So it's a good sanity check to actually visually have a look and go, okay, I think this is what it says it needs, but then you actually go and make the changes yourself and listen while you're doing it. So you're actually validating, because, seeing it on a graph is not the same as what you hear. Sometimes what they're saying it needs to happen is not right. So that's definitely a great addition there. So there you go. There's the new features of iZotope Ozone 9. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like the new features that they've added? Do you think there could be some other improvements that they should make in future versions? Is there something that you really are craving for in this product, or are you really impressed with it? Are you going to upgrade or purchase it if you don't already own it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. As I mentioned previously in the video there, I am going to do a separate video on the two new modules, the low end focus and the master rebalance. So check those out in the coming weeks as I release them out to you. But let me just say that I am impressed with them and I am really liking the product and what they have done with it. So hopefully you've got something out of this video, and if you do like what you see, then please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all of my future videos. I thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.